Today, Three Women Voices welcomes a remarkable woman, a breast cancer survivor who refused to give up. This is her amazing story.
Hi, my name is Wanda Briscoe, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer on January the 19th, 2011. And how I found out I had breast cancer, I've always got my mammograms when I turned 40. And so in November of 2010, I always used to wait to the end of the year to get my mammogram. And I got my mammogram done. And then right before Christmas vacation in December of 2010, my doctor called and she said, you need to come back in for another mammogram. And I was on my way to Maryland because I was living in Atlanta, Georgia at the time. So I told her, I said, well, I'll come back in when I return to Atlanta from the holidays. So when I returned back, I went in for the mammogram, thought everything was fine. Then I get another call. You need to come back in for another mammogram. Now, this will be the third mammogram. So I went back in and they ended up doing a sonogram. And after they sonogram, I got a call and they said, you need to come in to do a biopsy. It still never dawned on me that something could have been wrong. I went in for the biopsy and they told me, this was on a Friday, and they said, we're going to give you a call within a week with the results. And it wasn't even a week. It was several days later. And so I remember I was in my apartment by myself, and my doctor called and she said, Wanda, are you alone? And I said, yes, not knowing why she would ask me that. And then she said, the results are in. You have breast cancer. And those 4 words just shook me to the core. It felt like someone had punched me in my gut, actually. And I remember I was standing up in my dining room, and I just screamed. I just screamed on the phone, and my doctor, she said, I'm going to give you a moment to get yourself together. And then she said, I'm going to give you a name of a breast surgeon. This is the best in the nation. I was going to one of the best hospitals in Atlanta, Georgia. And she said, you need to contact your family, contact your sons. And I just felt lost at that moment. I had just separated from my husband. We had been married for almost 15 years. It had only been 4 months. And I was like, I do not need anything else at this time. And so I remember getting off the phone with her, and I called my best friend, which was in Maryland, and I told her, and we cried together. She said, you have to call your parents and your son. My middle son at the time, he was away in college. He was at Georgia Southern. And so I made the calls, and, we talked about what were the next steps. I called the breast surgeon, and they gave me a date when to report. And my parents drove from Maryland to Atlanta. But it was like, when the doctor called and told me those 4 words, you have breast cancer, and when I fell to the floor, it was like a supernatural strength got me up off the floor. And I just knew I had to fight. I've never had to fight for anything in my life. I had a stroke at the age of 38, but it was just a TIA, so I recovered from that. But this is breast cancer. It never was in my family. So I was the first to be diagnosed. And then you have all of these questions. Where did it come from? How do I get it? And, it was just a low moment in my life. And then God just started pouring into me, letting me know that this is not a death sentence. This is not a death sentence. All sickness is not unto death. And so at that moment, I chose to live. Yes, I was going through another trial in my life, but to me, people go through divorce and, they can recover from it. But here I am, I got to fight for my life. I have 3 sons, so I chose to live. And so I always say that breast cancer was not a death sentence for me. Breast cancer was a life sentence because it taught me how to live. I was in stage 1, okay. And I would have never found the tumors myself because the tumors were in my milk ducts.
Okay.
And your milk ducts are like the straws in your breast. So I never would have found the the
Okay.
tumors. So it's always important to get your yearly mammograms. If you have a history of breast cancer, you have to get them, they encourage you to get them before age 40. But when you turn 40, get your yearly mammograms. If you notice something different, let your doctor know. So I had stage 1, and then there were different options that was offered to me. Of course, I didn't know what any of these terminologies were because I'd never heard of, breast cancer in my family. So I was offered lumpectomy, which is when they remove the tumor from your breast, and some people call that a partial mastectomy, or I was offered mastectomy, which is when they remove the entire breast. So I opted for a lumpectomy. And so I had my first lumpectomy on February the 9th, 2011. And my parents stayed with me. It was in and out surgery. So my parents stayed with me for a few days. Then they drove to Maryland. And when they do a lumpectomy, they remove your tumor. And then they also remove some of the cells from around the tumor. And then they called a week later and said, some of your cells from around that we removed also tested for cancer. I was like, sheesh. So then my parents had to come back to Georgia. And then my second surgery was on February the 24th. And, they stayed with me again. So then I was going along, thought everything was fine. And then one morning I woke up and my t-shirt was wet. And then, I sweat a lot at night. So I just figured, it was perspiration, but it was full of blood. And that scared me. And here I am alone in an apartment, didn't know what to do. So I drove myself to the emergency room. The hospital was about 15, 20 minutes from my house. And I had gotten an infection in my breast. So then that delayed my time in starting treatments. And so I had to, once that healed, I had to do radiation treatments. And so my course of treatments was 33 radiation treatments, but it was 3 beams at each session. So actually my body was touched 99 times by radiation, but God healed me from that, and no residue from the treatments or anything.
When you say it was touched that amount of times, explain what you mean by that for people that don't know.
Okay, so when I went in for my treatments, they had 3 different machines. And so one machine would touch me on the outside of my left breast, and then another machine would touch down straight on the breast, and then another machine would touch on the inside of the breast. And I had to do that every day, Monday through Friday. And it was hard because after the 10th treatment, the radiologist said, your body is going to start feeling weak. And I was like, after the first 5, I was like, I feel fine. Mm-hmm. But then it was like after that 10th treatment, like she said, it was like a switch went on in my body. And at the time I was living in an apartment, and I was on the 3rd floor. And it didn't have any elevators. And it was very hard for me to climb the steps. And my mother came to Atlanta at that time. And, we went out to eat after my radiation treatments one time. And I went to stand up and I fell back in her arms. That's how weak my body had gotten. She had to help me up the stairs to the apartment. My mother had to sit on the bed and feed me. It was like, the cancer and the treatments had just taken over my body to where I went almost like to a state where I couldn't even feed myself or do anything. But I'm just thankful that my mother was there, because all she could feed me was applesauce at the time.
Okay, so when the cancer and the radiation was like beating up your body,
yes,
how did you find the strength, the internal strength to fight?
I think God put that in there. I believe that God gives us all a certain amount of strength, but it takes a certain trial or a certain test that we're going through. And I knew that I had to fight for my sons, because my family had already been ripped apart, going through the divorce. And I was like, I can't, I can't fail my kids. I can't fail myself. And God just instilled with me a fight. And then I was just reading the scriptures, and then God pointed me to Isaiah 66:9, because I had a lot of questions for God. We had some one-on-one tough conversations, if I can be transparent. And I was like, God, no one in my family has had this. Why did I get it? I was active playing tennis. Some people say, because if you eat meat, but that's not a case for that. And I was like, everything, I was like, I'm already down in the dumps because of a divorce, because it was actually my second divorce. And I was like, how can cancer of all things, come on my doorstep? And I came across this scripture that God directed me to, and it was Isaiah 66:9. I had never in my life read this scripture before. And it was, I will not cause pain without allowing something new to be born. And that scripture with right then and there gave me the strength. It was like a light bulb went off. Aha, I get it, God. You have my attention. Because I had gotten away from God. I was mad at God because I was like, God, I'm going through this divorce. I don't hear you. You're not speaking. And I was just mad. I was mad at the world. So I believe that God sometimes will use something to get our attention. And that's what it was for me.
Okay. So now, in your fight, I know you learned things about yourself.
Yeah.
Tell us some things that you learned about yourself, and then tell us, for women that's listening, how they can go about having a attitude of fighting,
Yeah.
giving up.
Yeah, I learned that I was a people pleaser, unfortunately. I am a pastor's daughter, and so you grow up with always pleasing others. And a lot of times when you're doing that in relationships and friendships, that can be detrimental, because I lost myself as a woman trying to please others. I didn't even know what Wanda liked and what Wanda didn't like. And so when I was in that apartment by myself, and I believe sometimes God has to get us to ourselves to get our attention. And so my prayer was, God, show me me, basically, show me me. And God did. And it was some things I didn't like about myself, and I felt that, I always had to say yes to people, even if I didn't want to do something, I always had to say yes, because I just felt if I said no, they'd be like, well, they don't want to be my friend, or anything like that. I didn't know boundaries. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I had to learn going through this. And I would say to women that are going through the fight, learn self-care, learn that no is a sentence, learn to use the word no, do not be a people pleaser, and learn to discover yourself. Whether it's through journaling or even just sit quiet and just allow God to speak to you. And if you let him talk to you, you will get his attention. He will let you know what he wants you to do and what he wants to get out of you.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So now, how did your fight impact your life and your career?
Wow, that fight, I started journaling after I got breast cancer. Every day when I would come home from radiation treatments, crawl up in the bed, because that's how weak I was, I would journal. And I would just write about, what I was going through at the breast cancer. I started doing research and then found out, that breast cancer impacts 1 in 8 women. White American women, they're diagnosed more, but African American women die from it more. And I noticed that at the breast cancer center, I was the only African American woman in there getting treatment. So I'm like, if we're dying more from it, then where are we? And then I was the youngest. So I started doing research, and then I started giving speeches.
The email, I was like, wow, things that you do for God, you just doing it for God, and I've overcome so much, a stroke at the age of 38. I'm a 9-year breast cancer survivor.
Breast cancer, the statistics, how can we as a community come together and educate the community? And then from that came a book And my book was called The Fight Within, because that's actually what I was in. I was in for the fight of my life. And it's an encouraging book, not just on breast cancer, but just for anyone, men and women, you know, whatever you're going through, that there is a fight within you, whatever your trial is.
So now when you wrote your, tell everybody the name of your book again.
It's called The Fight Within.
Now, when you were writing your book, what were you experiencing inside emotionally through the process of writing?
Emotionally, I was at, I don't know how low a point person can go for self-esteem, but I was there in the pit.
Okay.
I was, because I just felt parts of me as a woman have been taken from me, and I just felt less than a woman. I remember the first time I looked in the mirror and I took the bandages off, you know, to do the cleaning and all of that. And I just cried, and I just cried uncontrollably, because I had 2 lumpectomies. And then when I had gotten the infection, my breast indented. And so then I had to have a 3rd surgery, which was like a reconstructive surgery to try and, you know, bring it up some. And it was just so noticeably different. And I just felt like, God, why is this happening to me? I don't look, you know, I didn't like the way I looked. And, you know, then going through a divorce, and you're like, you know, if I ever remarry or date, will a man look at me differently? You know, so all of those things, you know, were going through my mind. And then with the I've always had long hair. And then with the additional stress from cancer and divorce, my hair started falling out. You know how women feel about our hair. And I was like, I just can't believe this is happening to me. I felt very low at that point.
Okay. So now, how did you go from your book, and I know you started an organization, so how did you find, you were fighting for yourself and you wrote a book, and then how did you put yourself out there to help other people?
When I started giving, when I gave my first breast cancer speech, it was at a church in Atlanta, Georgia. It was a small church, and everyone was, you know, I was just transparent about everything I was going through and how I felt. And it was like, you need to keep telling your story. So I was like, okay. So then my father's a pastor in Maryland. So then for Breast Cancer Month of October 2011, they invited me to speak at the church. So I spoke at the church, and then one of his pastors, after I spoke in front of the congregation, he said, so when is the book coming out? And I laughed at him. I said, this isn't a book. This is my journal. This is personal. But then the book, you know, a publishing company contacted me, and then the book came out. And from the book, it's just like God just kept opening up so many doors, you know, especially in the African-American community, to educate people on the disease and how we can, you know, not just preventive measures, but how we can take better care of ourselves. And if someone else is going through breast cancer, how you can care for them. And then I just found that there was a deep gap of a lack of education for us. And so before had moved to Maryland, I moved back to Maryland in 2016, but before that time, I became a part of an organization at Calvert Hospital in Calvert County. It was called SOS, which stood for Survivors Offering Support. And we had to get formal education on that. And we were mentoring women that were newly diagnosed with breast cancer. So that's, it was like, that became like my niche. It was like, that was my baby. I really enjoyed doing that. And then I was in that program for 3 years, and then there were some budget cuts, so the program wasn't funded. But to me, I was like, but women still need to know what's going on. There are women who still need to be educated. How can I help these women? So I started my business called Mariposa Enterprises. And Mariposa stands for butterflies, because butterflies is like my trademark. I have people that know me, they know I love butterflies. I have butterfly tattoos. And it has been tremendous. It has been a tremendous business. And I not only help people who have breast cancer, just for cancer in general. You know, I go to their homes. If they need me to go with them to treatment, I educate their families on the do's and the don'ts to help someone with cancer, because sometimes people don't know what to say. Someone who's had cancer, and I gave some very frank some situations that happened to me in my book. I remember one person said to me, well, you don't look like you have breast cancer. Well, what does breast cancer look like? You know, and then one person, well, you're lucky they caught it early. And then that's when I was first diagnosed. I was just, you know, in my own woe is me world. And I was like, well, how can you say I'm lucky I have breast cancer when I have it and you don't?
Yeah. Okay.
So that sparked a conversation.
Okay.
You know, on things, what to say and what things not to say. Because people will say things and it's like, I don't think that
they don't think.
They don't think what they're saying. It can be hurtful. Very, very hurtful. So I started educating people on the do's and the don'ts, and that's been very helpful.
Okay. So now, how has your story impact other women that you, or men too, that you know about? Have anybody ever came to you and said, I'm so happy that you shared your story, and, you know, tell us about something like that?
Every time I give a speech, and I've had women come up to me, and some will inbox me on social media, some was, because I give my email, some will send me an email, some will give me a phone number, and they will say, you know, thank you for speaking for us, because I'm too scared to say those things. I'm too scared to say that I had low self-esteem, because in the church, it may look like that you have a lack of faith. And that's not the case. You're just being human. You know, it's nothing wrong with being human. And, you know, for the men, you know, giving them examples, you know, just a part of your significant other, your wife or your fiance or whatever the case may be, may have been taken, but she's still a person. Love her unconditionally. Help her through that. And because at the Cancer Center, we, like in around February, you know, Valentine's Day, they would always have classes for us on intimacy and breast cancer.
Okay.
You know, on how to feel good about your body during that time, you know, when everyone is celebrating love and the negligees and, you know, and all that, you may not feel like doing that. So I also educate the men, love her unconditionally, you know, going through that. You know, it's a scar, but love her for her heart.
Okay. So now, what words could you give to women about encouraging them if they're going through breast cancer, or if they, let's say, they don't go and get their tests, or, you know, get tested like good, or they're procrastinators? Give some words of encouragement or advice.
Advice first. If you're an age of 40, get your mammograms every year. Do not hesitate. And I also say you can make it a girlfriend day. You know, grab a girlfriend and get your mammogram, and then afterwards have lunch or go to a spa. You know, if you're scared to get it by yourself, because the machine is uncomfortable. It's not a comfortable machine. But don't procrastinate, because the longer you procrastinate, the breast cancer can advance. And stage 4 is the last stage for breast cancer. So you don't want to get it, you know, to that stage, because early detection is key. You know, once they catch it early, you know, your survival rate is greater than if they catch it at your later stages. And if you do have breast cancer, I would advise someone, make sure that you have a strong support system, because you're going to need it. And you're going to need people around you that are positive. And you're going to need people around you that are uplifting. And, you know, one thing about cancer, or just in general, not just breast cancer, what I found out is that it will separate the wheat from the tare. And we know from the Bible. I always say, people will support you until it's time to support you. So at that time, you will definitely see who is in your corner, who is your friend, who is going to come by to assist you, to offer to take you to treatment, or even to come by and bring you food. It's the little things when you're going through cancer that you don't think about, that you may need help with: laundry, your meals, keeping your house clean. So just stay encouraged, but always make sure that you have a strong support system around you, because that is so important.
Mm-hmm. Now, what would you say about women who say, I don't need a breast exam?
I would say, get a breast exam. Do
Okay.
not.
Because I have an aunt who says that thing. She said,
Really.
I don't believe in doing breast exams.
Yeah, and I've had people, women that will say, well, you got to die for something.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't, why have that attitude?
Yes, that's self-sabotage.
That's
Yes.
self-sabotage.
Yes.
And to me, that's selfish, because you're not thinking about your loved ones. You're not thinking about those that are around you.
Yes.
Get your mammogram. A lot of times for African-American women, we do have dense breasts, which are, we're a little thicker.
Mm-hmm.
And so your doctor may call you back to say, I may need another test, but don't be alarmed.
Yes.
And also do your self-exams, your monthly exams every month, because that can also detect whether you have, a lump or something.
Yes.
But get your breast exams every year,
Yes.
once you turn 40. And if you have a history, you need to go earlier than that.
Yeah. And especially if it runs in your family.
Especially, and the way that they have it broken down for how it runs in your family, if it's your mother, your sister, or your aunt.
Okay.
And then also on your father's side, if it's like your father's sister, that close proximity, make sure that you get tested early.
Right.
Some people, that I know of have had breast cancer and they're in their 30s.
Okay.
But it's ran in their family. So
yes.
You also need to know your family history, and a lot of us don't know that.
Yes, that's right.
Ask those questions. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and like you said, you need to ask questions, because a lot of people ask questions, and especially the right questions.
The right questions,
Yes.
Not just your high blood pressure questions.
Yes.
Or your diabetes questions. Ask, if you have a grandparent or great grandparent, grandmother, great grandmother that, has passed on, and they say, well, why did, grandma pass? And, try and find out, that type of information.
Yeah. And then sometimes it's a good idea to take somebody with you so you can have them as an advocate for you,
Yeah, and what I did at the first meeting with the breast surgeon, with my parents even they was driving back and forth from Maryland to Atlanta. That's their hearts. And one of my aunts used to work in the medical field.
Okay.
So she was in the meeting with us. So it was my parents and my aunt and myself and the breast surgeon. And so he went over all the tests. He went over what stage I was in, and showed us the picture on what it looked like and the size, where it was located in the breast. And he broke it down for us in plain language. And I am so grateful that God sent him that particular doctor, because he broke it down. And then my aunt took notes, which I still have. Everything he talked to us about, my aunt took those notes and wrote them out. Yeah.
Okay.
That was helpful.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you, Wanda, for coming.
You're welcome.
Story. And if anybody wanted to reach out to you, how can they reach you?
They can reach me on my website, and that's wandabriscoe.org. And there's a contact page on the website if they would like to reach out to me for anything, speaking engagements, if they need encouragement. And I'm on social media. On Facebook, it's Wanda Briscoe, and on Instagram, it's I am Wanda Briscoe.
Okay. And I want to thank everybody for watching. And
thank you.
Again, of Three Women Voices. You can reach Three Women Voices at threewomenvoices@gmail.com. We're on Instagram at 3_women voices. We're on Facebook at the number 3 Women Voices. And website is threewomenvoices.com. And I want to thank everyone for watching. Thank you, Wanda.
You're welcome. Have a beautiful day.
You too.